Muchas gracias, afición. Este es para vosotros.
Yo, what is up, y'all? I hope you're having a great day today. It's your boy Paramount here, and today I'm going to be talking about the whole lore about man and robot. So, let's go! Now, before this video starts, I'm going to give you a heads up real quick. So, this video will be split into 3 parts. So, part 1 will be like season 1, part 2 will be like season 2, and then the final will be like season 3. So, yeah, enjoy this video. Oh yeah, I'm also here, man and robot. So basically what this episode is even about is, Brian is telling his backstory of him being bullied a lot since when he was, like, in middle school, aka 7th grade. So, yeah. What inspired me to make this show is that I liked robots and all that stuff because, WALL-E was my childhood movie since when I was, like, 7 years old. So, yeah. WALL-E is my favorite movie still to this day. And what also inspired me to make this show is that I wanted to make this character named Brian as the nerd because he's like really smart and he just reminds me of like my classmate. So yeah. Brian was like the chill dude, like he doesn't even want anything bad happen to Botman because he just wants to keep him safe. And Brian is like the main antagonist for this show. And he is like really close friends to Botman because he created Botman in his basement. Speaking of Botman, the reason why I choose this character is because it just reminds me of a bot, like a robot. So, yeah. He's also, like, very kind and, like, he just wanted to have friends, but most of the people reject him because of how he is and what he is and all that stuff. And Botman is also very close friends with Brian because Brian and Botman are friends with each other. And the main duo is, like, the main antagonist, like, for this show. So yeah. I also made this character named Carl, which is Brian's best friend, which reminded me of my friend named Brody, aka my homie. What this episode is mainly about is that Brian built like his prototype and then it did not go so well. The reason why is because he built his prototype incorrectly, so he gave it a second try, and then it worked. He named it that robot, the newer version of his prototype, Botman, and that's how Botman was made. Brian tells Botman to go on an adventure to, like, make some friends, because, not all robots are, like, harmful. And then everybody, like, rejected Botman because of him being a robot. And then it wasn't until he got home, and then Brian, like, calls Carl in order for him to have a friend. And then Carl accepts Botman as a friend. So, yeah. Moving on to episode 2. So mainly what the second episode is about is, like, it shows a, like, backflash of episode 1 at the end. And what this episode is about is that Botman learns how, like, a plug works and how sleep is. And all of a sudden, he only charges for, like, 10 hours, like, overnight. And then Botman meets up with his friend named Carl, aka his new friend, and all of a sudden they went to the park together, and then they had lunch with each other, and then that's just basically that episode. Also, Botman was programmed to not eat because he's a regular robot, and he's not an AI robot. Moving on to episode 3. This episode is featuring, like, the class bully from 7th grade named Joe. Yeah, he's, like, the main villain in the Man and Robot franchise. He was featured back in the pilot episode, aka Season 1, Episode 1. The reason why I decided to create this villain is because I just wanted like a perfect villain for this franchise. So what this episode is that the class bully from 7th grade, aka Joe, had literally found Botman, and then all of a sudden he had to use a microscope to look at like how it was made, and then all of a sudden it said, for the tag, it said, made by Brian, aka the creator of Botman. The reason why is because the 7th grade class bully, aka Joe, hated Brian's inventions because they look stupid to him. And he decided to kidnap Botman and then take him to his own lair, aka his hideout. And he was going to smash him, but not for long. Moving on to episode 4. So mainly what this episode is about is like part 2 of episode 3. So like it still counts as episode 4. This episode is about, like, Brian and Carl rescuing Botman from Joe's hideout or lair, if you want to call it anything. And all of a sudden, Brian and Carl are trying to pry open that door so many times, and then they actually managed to get in, fortunately. And then Joe, like, challenging, like, Brian for, like, a battle contest to, like, see if Brian wins, then he gets his, like, robot friend back. But if he manages to lose, then that means that Joe will crush Botman completely. So Brian and Joe was like fighting each other, and then all of a sudden Brian makes a statement, "I'm not alone." And then what Joe was like saying, he was like, "What?" And then in like a confused way, and then all of a sudden Carl shows up and finishes off Joe like entirely. But the good part is that they got their robot friend back. And that's just the episode. Moving on to episode 5. Oh yeah, just to give you a heads up, there might be some, like, bad grammar in this episode. So what this episode is about is, like, both Botman and Brian were, like, bored. And then all of a sudden, they just wanted to build a time machine because, just to get rid of their boredness. And then all of a sudden, they test it out. And then all of a sudden, it takes them to 1989 for, like, a random reason. And then all of a sudden, they exclaim that they loved living in the 80s. They exclaimed that it was such a good time to live in. And then I also made, like, a reference to The Simpsons. It's called The Samsons. I also made a parody based off of like Fox Channel. It's called the Box Channel. And then they also made like a comment saying that it was like a funny show. And then all of a sudden, they were also making another exclaimment that they just wanted to live in the 80s for like a long time, but they needed to go home eventually. And that's just the episode. Moving on to episode 6. 6, 7. So this episode is about Botman and Brian trying to get home to go back to 2025, and their time machine was broken for like the rain dropping on it, and they just went back to 65 million years ago. But as when they're about to travel back to 2025, Brian accidentally slipped his hands, and then they accidentally traveled to 1925, where they met this 1920s man. And then Brian and Botman tell him what 100 years would look like for this 1920s man. And then luckily they got back home with their time machine fixed out of nowhere. Anyways, moving on to episode 7. So what this episode is about is Botman is going out to make more friends, but this time things changed. He got robot friends this time, and then he named his gang with his friends. He named his group called the Robot Gang, and then all of a sudden they said they were going to meet up tomorrow, and then Brian was pleased about Botman having actual friends but robots. Anyways, on to the last episode of the first season. This is the final episode for season 1. By the way, this episode is about Botman and his friends thinking of going out to see a movie, but all of a sudden, they don't have any money. So they went to Gerald's house, and then Botman picked a movie from the movie bin. And then just as the movie ends, Botman went home. And then Brian was really really surprised that he saw a movie that's all about superheroes. And then all of a sudden, that's just the episode. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and the subscribe button. And also,
I also created the Masonlodian Company. Get it right! And also, Man and Robot is made by Masonlodian Productions too!
Also, part 2 of this lore will come soon after season 2 is made. Anyways, bye.